Meanwhile, there's a lot going on with as it relates to Vladimir Zelensky and sort of the Western elites because we have Davos, right? We have Davos that's been unfolding, and something happened yesterday that was interesting in Vladimir Zelensky's office, which I think speaks to perhaps we were talking earlier, maybe the desperation right now of the Zelensky government. There is plenty of reports now about the Russian army basically starting to surround Ukrainian forces.
In fact, Ukrainian officials have shown this on maps, right? That they are surrounded and are saying that they think that they can come back around through the bottom if they retake Crimea by the end of the year. So even though the situation does look desperate, they let us know that they have a plan. I want to cover these sort of internal administration stories with a grain of salt because both sides of the media say like, oh, there's internal fractions inside Putin's government there. And, you know, there's another side now saying that there's internal fractions inside Zelensky's. We don't know, right? And so I want to make it clear that like this is not a leading way to cover this news. It's just, I think it's another data point in that any of the media that tells us like we got to keep sending money because Ukraine is winning, right? We should ask more questions, especially if we're the ones footing the bill.
So this is RT, right? This is the source RT. It's been, of course, banned in a lot of Western media, right? It was just kicked out of Canada and so forth. So, but this is their coverage of a meeting yesterday with Western leaders, and this was "Go F yourself." Zelensky's presidential advisor called Westerners urging concessions in the name of peace, dumb Fs. Like, so we're going to appease these guys. We are going to freeze the war so that we can give up our land to the Russians. Go F yourselves, Zelensky's aide tells Western officials.
Yes, but you know, there also was a whistleblower who recently said that Zelensky was leaning towards peace and was talked out of it by Boris Johnson, right? So
yeah,
these are internal strife sort of leaks that we cannot corroborate.
Okay, but we can corroborate actual Telegram postings from other officials in that same office. And so this is on the Telegram page of Asterovich. This is Alexei. Sorry, not Russian. I'm not Ukrainian. Alexei Arestovich. I hope I'm saying that right. I know we have Ukrainian watchers who will correct us. Has resorted to obscene language to criticize those in the West. And then he insisted in an interview on Wednesday, and then Mikhail Podolyak on Telegram from the same Zelensky's office took to Telegram to clarify this. So I want to put this on the screen. Now, this is a translation. This comes from his Telegram posting there on the left. It's run through a translation app. So I want you to be able to see it there on the screen. And if you can correct it at home if you believe that this is incorrect. I want to go a little closer in the next image. The next image is closer. And he says this: I want the most complete understanding that nothing is over yet. Therefore, we must continue to fight in all directions. Russia spends huge resources to prove to the world the main thing. Allegedly, Russians have the right to kill Ukrainians and not get a full-fledged punishment for it. So, and he goes on and on and on, but he says at the bottom, so there is no ambiguity. Ukraine will not participate in this discussion. We do not trade our citizens' territories or sovereignty. This is a clear red line. And goes on to say, so basically, we're not going to freeze this war. We are going to fight till the end. Of course, this is all in response to Henry Kissinger. This back and forth, hearing what Henry Kissinger said at Davos about surrendering your land to Vladimir Putin really sent a shock through, because this was the word, and I think it gave cover for a lot of other people at Davos, other Western leaders, to say, like, Henry Kissinger, warmonger, is saying this? Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. Like, the way to end this is kind of how Noam Chomsky said it would end, which is Russia's not going to lose this. So either Ukraine is totally destroyed, or there's a peace settlement and a discussion about turning over the eastern section of this country right now, because otherwise it's going to be wiped off the map. But here you have from Zelensky's own office saying, we're not going to do that. We're not listening to Henry Kissinger. We're going to stick it out.
I mean, I'm no military analyst, right? but I can read a map, and it does not look like there is a clear path to go back to the way it was before, right? There is no going back. The regions that have been won by Russia will stay in their possession, despite the sort of desperate pleas from the Ukrainian government to send more aid. I just don't see how that could be possible.
Yeah. So I don't see how it's going to happen either. I don't see how they're going to get. Are they going to just pour all these heavy weapons in there, and that's going to be the answer? I just don't see how it's going to happen.
Even so, right? To what end? To what end? And especially now that there are military operations in Asia now between Japan and South Korea, and the United States is participating in that. Like, I know that weapons are bottomless in America, kind of like Red Robin French fries, but there does seem to. The one thing I miss the most of my life.
Yes.
But this, I mean, you can't mass produce those to the same scale as Red Robin French fries.
No, that's right. You can't. Well, yeah. So let us know.
Well, I think that. I was just gonna say. So I think Natalie hit it though. Like when she said, like, to what end? I think that's the point. Is they don't want an end.
Right.
The hope is from the weapons manufacturers that there actually is no end.
Yes.
Because then we have to create another war, and right now we don't have to do that because there's already one going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my take.
No, it's a never-ending story. I mean, that's the thing. It's and what do we get at the end of the never-ending story? The nothing, right? It's the total destruction of a country, and
or a culture. Yes. I mean, I was really fixated on Russell Brand's video about the school shooting this week, and he says, I feel like this is indicative of a decline of a culture in general, right? We are also disconnected to ourselves, disconnected to source, disconnected to nature. Just in general, there are so many reasons you can attribute to this type of thing happening in a culture, and it's unproductive to worry about guns and weaponry and all of that kind of thing. But this culture that's been desperately fought for is a culture that is owned due to violence and weaponry, right? Pretty much all land nowadays was conquered, every country sort of set its boundaries with violence. And it does feel like we're at an inflection point right now where governments are desperately clinging to this violently and bloodily, if that's a word.
You talk about content analysis sometime. It would be interesting because of the prevalence of like social media and the amplification of social media. Is it worse now than it's ever been? Or is it just normal and it's just amplified? Because I saw a chart yesterday that showed in 2020 like the amount of murders in 2020, of course, pandemic related. You lock a lot of people down, you take away their jobs, you close their businesses, you take away their livelihood. Shit's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. So what happened? Like, why 2020 was there this huge spike in violence? Think about it, right? Is it just amplified now, or was this always how it is? We just hear more of it now because of social media.
I don't know.
I'm not asking you to answer that like you have the answer in front of you. I mean,
I'm thinking about how much I want to share about my own internal thought process, especially in a week when children have been harmed because of a cultural acceptance of a social contract, which is we elect people who will not change our policy on guns and allow an entire population of people to feel disenfranchised. And we know that's a dangerous combination. And we're feeding them stimulants and like all of these things like feed into the idea.
Poverty.
Right. That
drugs, opioids.
That makes America an extremely dangerous place, and all the more dangerous because, well, for a lot of reasons. But we live abroad and we are Americans. And as soon as we open our mouth, people are like, oh, Americans, right? And they immediately come to me. I'm struck at how often this happens to me is people say, I love America. I love American music. I love American movies. I lived in Boston for a while. It's like they immediately try to prove to me their love of American culture. And I'm like, America's so brilliant because all the things that are wrong, right? All the things that make children unsafe are masked by like this beauty of Hollywood where people think everyone there has like beautiful water from a pitcher, and
Right.
and it's like the idea of exporting your culture, but also exporting violence around the world that I have been stuck with this week. And I don't know what to do with those thoughts, but they're just sort of circling around me when people are saying, "Oh, you're American. I love American. Let me prove to you that I am American too, or that I have." And I'm like, I left there on purpose, right?
Right. There's a reason we're not there.
And so, this idea that my tax dollars, I work really hard. We live abroad, but we're Americans. We still have to pay just as much as everybody else into the American tax system. And it goes towards harming people. But, there's this sort of love of all things American. I don't know. I'm stuck on this and I can't reconcile it. And I know that, you'll get people who feel very threatened by me saying this will be like, well, then get the heck out. I did,
Right.
so that's
always
fine. I still have to pay my taxes.
That comment, by the way, is at the same level of ignorance as, oh, then you must be a Putin sympathizer because you don't want war, because you don't
Right.
want people to die. So you must be put in whatever sympathizer you happen to be. Oh, then you must be a Putin,
Right. And so
sympathizer.
people sort of feel like, they need to oversimplify, like, this is the greatest country in the world. How dare you say that, right? That's fine that you say that. But again, what I think I was trying to say last night is you have to think of what your social contract is with the government. And if you're fine with it, then stick with it, right? And the rest of us that aren't, you just have to make different choices. And then you really ruminate, like, I feel all the time that I am plugged into the matrix of the American government and that my life essence is going into not good things. And I don't like how that feels.
So many people, I saw so many comments in our YouTube chat or commentary today saying, because of the story we covered on Brazil and how they stood up against the WHO, and they're saying we're not going to sign this treaty. And I saw so many comments from people. They're like, that's it. I'm moving to Brazil. Like, for them, it's like their social contract is like, they don't want the United States government turning over its sovereignties to the World Health Organization that's going to tell them how to live their life.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a good turning point for us to talk about Davos now, because this is a group of elites that get together in Davos, Switzerland, and you have the World Economic Forum that's completing its week, where they're eating all sorts of ridiculous food and expensive foods. By the way, did you see this? This is one of the things that they're eating right now. This is the global elites eating a $50 burrito. Take a look at this. This is what $50 will get you.
That doesn't even look like a very good burrito. It looks very dry to me.
It looks like it's been like sitting under a heat lamp. But here's your $50 burrito at Davos. Like, this is what they can spend money on. And not even like a good serving of guacamole. Like, that's not even a good guacamole, too.
Well,
Yeah,
no, it's not.
My sister-in-law, my brother-in-law make a hell of a better guacamole than that. Like, actual avocado with onions and like that looks like garbage for $50.
Yes, that
Yeah.
doesn't look
But
good.
maybe it's like marbled. Maybe it's like a nice marbled, like what is it, like Wagyu or something like that in there. you know, it'd have to be.
Yeah. But one of my closest friends lives in Switzerland, and she says that, Switzerland has a beautiful growing season, but it's not year round. So a lot of their more exotic foods are grown in Portugal, for instance, the avocados and the berries. I don't know about those tomatoes, but those are imported, right? A lot of those things can't be grown in the Swiss Alps, in the Swiss mountains. So they are, not only does that not look delicious, but it's got a high carbon footprint on it. So what, again, Davos, about those net zero panels?
Right. So let's talk about some of the latest stories out of Davos, because again, there's one theme here, apart from this is a CNBC article from Davos, over $50 for a burrito, and the menu items, the shellfish, and they're talking all about sustainability and the fish that they're bringing in for all of these events and all of the different panels and everything and all of the money that's being spent here. Make no mistake about it, like every panel, and I went through so many panels today, just seeing, looking at the titles, but then watching some of the different back and forth, and I got no way I'm watching all of these panels, by the way. You can't. You would pull your hair out to watch them all. But there was a theme that just like ran through this. I think there were two themes. One, it's all about control. Like, how can we have more control over you? That's it.
But it's couched in panels like getting young people to, I can't even say it without laughing. Getting young people to trust us again.
Yeah, that was one of the panels.
Yes, it was.
And that was actually one of the themes too. It's like, how can we restore trust here at Davos? That's one of our big things. They actually 6 weeks ago wanted to make sure that their panels were centered around how can we garner more trust with the world. I got an idea. How about you don't try to control other human beings? Why don't we start there with your microchips? That was one of the panels. We heard from Pfizer CEO talking about microchips. We heard from Alibaba CEO talking about tracking, carbon footprint tracking, of course. We heard from Henry Kissinger saying that Ukraine needs to surrender its land so that that Putin can take control of land. On and on and on the panels went. But I thought it was interesting. I kind of went back in history a little bit to look at last year's, and so I wanted to go through and see what changed. And here was an amazing panel that was just last year, and just listen to. This is why I think it's so confounding right now for these guys at Davos, because they will tell you out of one side of their mouth how important Russia is to the world economy, right? And how we should support Russia and have them as part of this conversation. We should be open and honest with each other. So this was last year's panel, and wait till you see who they introduce. Roll it.
Russia is an important global power. And there's a long-standing tradition of Russia's participation in the World Economic Forum. At this moment in history, where the world has a unique and short window of opportunity to move from an age of confrontation to an age of cooperation, the ability to hear your voice, the voice of the President of the Russian Federation, is essential.
It's essential.
Even and especially in times characterized by differences, disputes and protests, constructive and honest dialogue to address our common challenges is better than isolation and polarization.
Oh, okay. So just to be clear, we don't agree with you. We're totally, we're not on the same page at all. And we should always be talking, right? This is last year,
yes.
Right? So I'd like to introduce none other than Vladimir Putin from the Russian Federation.
Dear colleagues, dear Klaus, I've visited Davos many times, assisting meetings starting from the 90s. Mr. Schwab just mentioned that we met each other first back in 1992.
Yeah. Conversations, discussions, right?
Yet many panels this year center around what do we do about the Russian problem?
Right.
How do we remove dependence on Russian oil? How do we, so many panels are specifically about Russia as the enemy.
And this afternoon, in fact, we learned another mention from Davos about oil, specifically oil, saying, and it was George Soros, once again speaking today, saying that Russia is full of oil. Like literally their storage tanks are full. So again, just think about this, right? Like the world's like, we're going to sanction the shit out of you. We're going to run you right into the ground. Look at the ruble, okay? Look at the world's debt. Look at the United States, $30 trillion in debt, right? Look at Europe right now being squeezed with a lack of oil because they won't have these discussions. And Russia sitting on full storage tanks of oil with all kinds of food and agriculture. And that's why they're able to fund the rebuilding of Mariupol. We showed you all of those long convoys of trucks pouring into the Ukraine, to start to rebuild that city. And I heard from a lot of you, actually, those of you from Chechnya wrote to me and said, boy, I hope they rebuild that whole area like they did in Chechnya. And I heard from Chechens who wrote to me specifically to tell me, why do you think the Chechens support Russia? Because they rebuilt their whole country, or they rebuilt Grozny and other areas and, did a great job. I don't know. I'm not Chechen, so I'll take your word for it on that. But again, they're fully flush in cash, rubles up, oil's up, and they're not invited to the table. And all of these other elites who want to control you are in the position right now. I think they actually control everything. They absolutely control everything. They control the opportunity right now to stop this war and to push Vladimir Zelensky in the right way. And they're not. They're sitting on their hands.
Which is interesting. Yesterday, we had a comment on the video that I did about the Russian economy and the United States shutting down Russia's ability to repay its debts. The Western media will have you think that these Russian debts or Russian investments are not held by anybody. They're junk bonds. Nobody cares. But in fact, in the comments section, international investors had let us know that they don't feel like that at all. It's really only the Western media telling that to other investors, that there are global investors who are interested still in investing in Russia. And I appreciate those comments because I wouldn't see that. I still, from the media that is served to me otherwise. So I appreciate that tip.
Yeah, I heard from someone from an American in Russia who wrote to me, says he lives in Russia and watches us all the time. And he says, things are not as the media portrays it. He and we have other friends who live in St. Petersburg. So they just keep their head down, but they're doing fine. They're doing fine. So it's interesting, this Western narrative right now.
Right. I want to be careful. We're not, making it seem like, well, Russia seems fine. That's the best place to be. Right. Like sitting on a bunch of oil is still not a renewable fossil fuel. Is still a fossil fuel. Right. It's still destroying places and then going to rebuild them is not actually what is going to get us to our carbon emissions.
Yeah,
these
bringing
are not
tanks into a country is maybe, that's not how we would want our kids to solve a conflict. Right?
Yes. So,
Right.
okay, I just want to couch it as that doesn't mean that this is an awesome thing, right? What it means is we may not be getting the full narrative.
Yes.
And there may be, things that we don't get to know that others might think are favorable. But I don't see these rebuilding projects as oh, great. We're going to rebuild with renewable material. Now everyone lives in huts that's solar paneled. That's not the reality. These things are still, this is the carbon footprint of this conflict. I shudder to think.
Right. It's just amazing to me, though, that you're able to have conversations during times of conflict. And you saw Klaus Schwab there talking about how important it is, even during times of turmoil, to have discussions with people we might not agree with. Right. And so they're able to beam in via a Zoom call Vladimir Zelensky to the WEF, which is what they did. But there's no discussion from the Russian Federation in that regard.
There actually is a Russian expert on the panel, and I'd have to look back
A Russian
through it.
expert or
Someone actually from Russia is on at least one panel, because I combed through this the other day with a fine-tooth comb. I'd have to look back through because I didn't note it.
But Putin is not.
Not Putin, but I think it is someone like an economic advisor or somebody like that. Do you have the
I don't. I don't
program
have it.
up?
No, I have other notes on it.
Because
though.
I literally, I read it all, but I also just did a Control F. It was who there is from Russia? Do they get any voice? Because they do. It's minor, and there are also many representatives from China as well.
But just make sure, go. Make sure you. Sorry, wrong one. Sorry.
Make sure you brush your teeth.
No, I'm just trying to get all my. It's not used to my. There we go.
Make sure you floss.
Make sure you get your $50 burrito at Davos.
But that's also just kind of the price of things in Switzerland. We were in Switzerland recently, and a latte is $6. It's everything there is super expensive. That's just sort of the way of things.
But not $50.
Not $50.
But when you go to Davos, they know they can rack up the price for you.
Sure.
So did we accomplish anything at Davos? I mean, did we accomplish anything at the World Economic Forum? I mean, other than telling, George Soros saying that Russia has full storage and that Europe should hold on, don't do anything crazy, just hold, keep supplying weapons to destroy Vladimir Putin. We're going to control you with trackers and microchips. This is what was talked about. And these are some of the big takeaways and headlines from this event. Did it meet your expectations?
Not at all helpful to me. No, I didn't really learn much, but I wasn't invited either.
Yeah.
Maybe if I had.
Well, I for one feel good that billionaires get to walk away with some peace of mind, and that's really what I'm all about. As long as they get to feel good about themselves, I'm okay.
They get to get on their private jets and fly out of there, right? While they lecture everyone else about carbon footprints.
Yeah. I refer you to the piece we did on Monday about stakeholder capitalism and how they're just so happy to speak for everybody and how that is an impossibility.
Yeah, it's all about stakeholders was the theme. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. You know, we've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.